So folks, Shri is going to be talking about HDInsight, and Shri, floor is yours.
Hi team, good morning, good afternoon. Um, so today I want to talk a little bit about enterprise grade HD Insight. Let me go ahead and share my screen. The presentation consists of two parts. I would try to do first 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I'll try to level set HD Insight related items with everyone, and the next 15 minutes I would be demoing few items. So today's call is mostly on enterprise nature of HD Insight per se. I'm not going to teach anyone how to develop, that's for another session. But for today, it's all how to set up and the best practices kind of. So let's go ahead and start sharing my screen. Naveed, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. So in general, Azure HD Insight is good in perspective that we have this enterprise grade security, and therefore the system is almost foolproof as any other application that you might run on Azure. I think someone else started sharing the session. Thank you, guys. Yeah, someone is really excited about HD Insight. Okay, so we have the perimeter security. Of course, like isolating the clusters in virtual networks. During the demo, I will show you how to isolate the clusters in the virtual network. And if you choose so, you can actually use service endpoints of the services such as WASB and Azure SQL DB along with these virtual networks. Um, so actually, there is as of today there is no restriction on outbound traffic. It is coming, but it is not included in today's demo. As far as authentication goes, we'll be using Azure Active Directory. I'll be showing how we use Azure Active Directory and how we will be using a service called Azure Active Directory Domain Services, where the Azure Active Directory Domain Services converts or recognizes the LDAP call and associate with the Kerberos token that is required for authenticating into the HD Insight cluster. We'll take a look at that today during our demo in detail. Also, once someone passes the authentication step, then the next step is authorization. We use something called Apache Ranger um, that is incorporated as part of domain joined HD Insight cluster. You can actually configure Hive policies, let's say, on Ranger. Therefore, you can authorize someone to either, for example, look something like a social security number or mask something like a social security number. So then the data is of course encrypted, and I will also show how to incorporate LDAP-S security on using SSL, so that it is encrypted during transfer. Also, for Kafka cluster, you can I think bring your own key, and that is not part of today's demo. Okay, just as an FYI. So moving to the next, as you can see in this PowerPoint presentation, this is how we secure our HDInsight cluster. So the HDInsight cluster will be part of a virtual network, and you can actually put it in a subnet, just like how they have put it here with 4 worker nodes and 2 head nodes. And there will be gateways that comes. Uh, Guys, please mute if you are not talking.
Yes, Shri, don't worry about it. I'm taking care of that. Thanks.
Okay, sorry, just I derailed. Okay, so as part of Azure Active Directory domain services, like you see, like how uh, mm, you can actually divert the traffic using a load balancer between gateways, and of course, like the gateways speak with there are internal gateways that speak with the head nodes as such. We'll take a look at that. And as shown here, you can completely put your storage or meta stores you're generating as part of HDInsight in their own virtual networks. That provides even better security. So essentially, you're securing the endpoints, guys. That's all. So this is a detailed look. This is the next level of detail before we go into the demo. In this, you have the clear picture of how we will be authenticating and performing the access control. So if you are using Azure Active Directory domain services, um, we won't capture your passwords per se in Azure Active Directory. So for the very first time, we need actually the passwords to be hashed for Kerberos purpose. Therefore, there are two ways of doing password hashing and the synchronization. So depending upon on-prem or cloud-only accounts, that is not part of the scope. You can always contact your cloud solution architect, the infrastructure guys, as part of your account in order to do something like that. That's not that complicated. But we'll see in our demo how to deal with Active Directory domain services for today. So skipping into the demo, I'm not going into these slides. So we will actually take next 10 minutes for the demo itself, and then I will discuss, like some new enhancements for HDInsight. So let's go ahead and open file, new incognito window. So essentially, I have my own organization. Actually, this is provided to me by my friend Jim Dykes, who is a cloud solution architect here at Microsoft. So you go to just like portal.azure.com, and username is srram at microsnow.us. Microsnow.us is a fictitious organization. We enter the password for that organization. So I go inside my org. So inside my org, what you can see is, let's go to the resource groups. In the resource groups, there is something called Microsnow US Azure Active Directory Domain Services Resource Group. So in this, what you can see is microsnow.us is Azure Active Directory Domain Services. Okay, so this is how Azure Active Directory Domain Services looks like. So these domain services run two domain controllers, a primary domain controller and a backup domain controller, PDC and BDC. It is completely maintained and managed by Microsoft. You don't need to do a thing. So you can actually monitor the health and whatnot. So for a couple of reasons, I am showing you this in a little bit greater detail. So as you can see, my Active Directory, which is microsnow.us, is synced to this domain controller. Um, maybe few hours back. If someone changes their password, it syncs. Okay, so there is a secure LDAP on this, of course. Yeah, I'm not using self-signed certificate. I'm using the certificate given by CA to me for this domain. And then you go and see the properties. As we discussed, there are two domain controllers, 1.5 and 1.4. So in order to manage the domain controllers, you need to use a jump box within the virtual network, which is out of scope. We actually, that is not part of this demo. But anyways, this is the domain controller. Once I set up the domain controller, I sync up the users from my Active Directory to this domain controller. Then all I have to do is I have to create a managed user that has access to this domain controller with the role of, you can go here and see under the access control. In the access control, you will have assignments. For example, HDI-MI is that managed user, and you should provide HDInsight domain services contributor privilege to that user. And that's it. You don't need to do anything else. So once that is done, then you can go and spin HDInsight clusters. For example, I used another resource group, but within the same virtual network on a different subnet. So this is the HDInsight cluster. So this is how it looks like. So once I spin that HDInsight cluster, if you go and take a look at VNet itself, so let's go and take ADDS. In ADDS, my virtual network, I think Jim has put virtual networks in a separate resource group. Let me go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, here is my virtual network. So as you can see, right, there are these virtual networks and various gateways and network interface cards for head nodes, work nodes, and the public gateway, the internal gateway, the external gateway, and all that stuff. So this ensemble is completely transparent. It will be spun. So as far as the experience goes, all you have to do is you go and press create a resource. Once you do that, go to analytics, go to HDInsight, choose the custom. Here, just for now, let me type SRM, HDI, Spark 2 or whatever. Visual Studio Enterprise, you have to go into the cluster type. You can choose interactive query, Kafka, HBase, Hadoop, or Spark. And mine though, it is for HDI 3.6 with Spark 2.3. There is this Apache Ranger. That is the most latest configuration you can use for enterprise grade clusters that needs to be secured. If you are using HDI 4.0, there is no Apache Ranger support yet. So let's choose 2.3, 3.6. So let me actually do something. I'm not going to create it now, just to show you the experience. Let me spin it up in this RG under East US2. So we won't go past screen 2 in this demo. In screen 2 is the most important. This is the newer experience that was not there, and you can see it now. So you go to enable, and it's just 1 cent per core hour. It's very cheap though. So go to cluster admin. So choose one of the administrators. So as you know, SRM is a part of MicroSnow organization. So I choose that person. So go and choose the the groups that I need to be part. These are the security groups that are created as part of Active Directory itself, Azure Active Directory. So for example, I think Jim created an Hive users or something where you can put all of your Hive users inside that like this, right? So just do that. And important thing to note, it auto fills the LDAP-S. So LDAP microsnow.us on the port 636. Okay, so you don't need to do a thing there. I think this is part of South Central. Therefore, I chose the East US in the basics, so the virtual network did not pop up. But for now, imagine that if I would have chosen South Central, there would be virtual network, subnet, choose it, and then this is important. Okay, user assigned managed entity. Remember, we gave user assigned managed entity, whatever Hadoop contributor access. If you remember that step, this is the same guy, HDI-MI from that step. Fill that, and remaining things rest of the stuff is as you were doing all these days. Okay, so once you do that, this cluster will spin. So this HDInsight cluster is no different than any other HDInsight cluster, but if you go here and let's say you click on this URL, let's go into that. Here, instead of giving the I think you used to all these days give admin and the password. So you don't need to do admin and the password. You do my username at your enterprise domain and the password. Sign in into that. You go into the Ambari. So in the Ambari, if you go to manage Ambari, you can manage various users here in order to control the Ambari user interface itself. So for example, Sriram, Sriram might have some access, an administrator access or whatever, that will let me, for example, when I go to Ambari main page, I can actually if you see, I'm just a user. I don't think Jim made me an admin on this. So if I go to the action, I don't know, maybe I can start, stop, you have, Jesus, I'm sorry. Decline. Okay, so you can actually get various permissions depending upon what you choose under manage Ambari. But even better, like we spoke before, if you go dash and say Ranger, oops, I think I need to give you. Okay, so you go to Ranger, and in the Ranger, you can configure Hive policies right here. So you can configure it for masking, you can configure it for access, you can configure it for row level filter. So that's about it. So then the second enterprise grade feature, other than security, real quick, I want to show you is, let me go to the window. Another window I already opened another ensemble for you. So here what I have is I have actually um, a OMS um, workspace, like a workspace that is associated with these two log analytics templates, okay, that comes default. So if you go to this workspace and if you go to this workspace and go to this, for example, OMS portal, what you see here is in OMS, you can see all your enterprise clusters on a single pane of glass. Okay. Apparently, in this setup, I have an HDInsight interactive query and I have HDInsight Spark. And from the single pane of glass, you can go and maintain, manage everything, like you can monitor, you can see, you can customize everything to the T. This is highly customizable, just like how you customize any other application using log analytics. And therefore, you don't need any other specialized tool to do your enterprise HDInsight monitoring of various clusters on a single pane of glass. This is good enterprise features. So then for next couple of minutes, let's spend on the most latest features we got on HDInsight. So let me actually go to that talk a little bit about those, and I'll open it up for questions then. So we got this new release announced that is called Azure HDInsight 4.0 with Apache Hadoop 3.0. Apache Hadoop 3.0 got major overhaul, as you guys know. It's a big release. It's a big Hadoop release after a long time with very very cool features. Mostly that increases the speed and productivity kind of enhancements. So I'm not going to read, I can pass on this presentation to all of you. And also this presentation is um, part of the major talk that was done earlier this year during these announcements. So you can always go and check them out. But essentially, I'll speak at a very high level. Um, the the transaction support is key thing. So right now, you can actually communicate between Hive and Spark much more efficiently because of the transaction support. So that transaction support brings Spark and Hive even closer together. Not only that, we also integrated Apache Druid into our interactive cluster. So what that brings is it brings analytical capabilities that data warehouse developers were used all these days to the interactive cluster, so that you can actually perform those kind of analytical queries much more efficiently using Apache Druid. Okay, so that came. Then there are actually Apache HBase and Phoenix improvements that make developers much more productive in that area. Well, like I said, you can always go back and read them. One more thing on the performance is right now we are efficiently using uh, the space per se on HDInsight cluster itself. I'm not talking about the remote space, but the storage space within the cluster that actually provide cool things such as caching various things such as results caching, like dynamic materialized views is not part of that, but this another performance feature which you can always go and check. Let's move on because I want to open this for questions. And one thing to call out is bringing Spark and Hive closer together using Hive warehouse connector. So that's another cool thing. But anyways, like I'm not going through one by one. We will distribute this slide and you can see what are all the new features. But I'm really excited for HDInsight 4.0. So let's go back to the questions, and last 5 minutes I'm open to questions now. Um, let's see what all we got. Naveed.
Yeah, there are some questions in the IM window, and about slide deck. If you, yeah,
Yeah, so you said can password hash sync be on subset of the, yeah, you can do on the subset of the users. You can do a subset sync. Like I said, I'm not the right person to talk about that. You can definitely contact your solution architect from the infrastructure side. Huh.
The Azure AD sync option with on-premises domain controller, user bases, etc., or other objects, it's more probably tuned for the Azure AD folks who has depth knowledge on it. This question to me is more of like, does Azure AD support this hashing mechanism or not? Because everything goes through Azure AD and Azure AD DS for the authentication purposes.
Okay,
yeah,
we'll
that's a
take
good
that
good
offline.
good analysis. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be more of an Azure AD question.
Yep. I have a few questions. One of them is, I mean, do you know by on top of your head if serverless computing option is being integrated in the Hadoop 3.0? do you know if engineering team is talking about serverless computing? Like in Azure Databricks, you already have two things. Number one is you don't have to go through all these hoops to set up the authentication. Azure AD is built on Databricks, so it's ready to go. No ADDS or any other setup necessary. Number two is it also has serverless computing added to it, meaning that today you can configure it to have a minimum number of worker nodes and max number of worker nodes. You run a job, the
Yeah, I get.
job, if yeah.
Let me answer your question in the interest of time. I get it. Okay, so that is currently in private preview. We'll be rolling that out. I think I don't know when they will be rolling it out. But I myself have seen like 3 or 4 days back an email saying that if any customer is interested, they could contact their point of contact at the customer site, and they would be happy to enroll you in that mechanism, in that auto scaling thing. When workloads are not in use, the cluster usage will go down.
Right.
Yeah, so that is there. Yep, you can contact. Are there any other questions? Okay, friends, if that is the case, thank you for providing me the opportunity today to talk to you about the enterprise grade clusters. Um, we will obviously take next step. I'll during this year, sometime I will talk about the programming and whatnot within HDInsight itself. But today, my goal was to bring infrastructure closer to the Hadoop developers on HDInsight enterprise space. Thank you all for joining this call, and you all have a great weekend. I look forward to talking with you soon.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shri. I really appreciate, man. By the way, if you can
Yes,
send
yes.
me the presentation, I am making plans to upload all the presentation relevant to their session in the website. So I know they are not there yet, but I'm working on it. So please send me the presentation, man. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for joining. Have a wonderful weekend.
Okay, all
See
right.
you next week.